Hey everybody, Fanny here, and today is day 15 of my 75 Hard Challenge. I'm planning to take a slightly different approach to today's video. The algorithm works in interesting ways, and I was recently fed 75 Hard content, and I happened to watch a video just out of curiosity. And the creator was talking about things that are part of the 75 Hard Challenge that I didn't even really address on this channel. And then some that I hadn't even really thought about how it would be relevant to this or that people would even care. So whether today is quirks about my specific approach to 75 hard, or whether it's some skeletons in the closet kind of 75 hard stuff, today I'm going to get a bit personal. I will offer an initial trigger warning. I will talk a little bit about addiction, and I will talk a little bit about eating disorders. So if those are topics that are not safe topics for you, perhaps this isn't the video for you. But if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about how some of those topics interact with me and my 75 hard journey, well, then in that case, you're in the right place. So the first quirk, or skeleton, if we want to call it that, is my age. So I'm in my 40s, and that's probably not a surprise. I think I appear to be in my 40s. And being a 40-year-old person goes along with a variety of physiological, and even psychological changes. So first of all, my body behaves differently now than it did, of course, when I was in my 20s and 30s. When I was younger, I've been athletic and into exercise my whole life. I mean, I think I started like literally doing exercise videos when I was like 8, or, actually, yeah, I was at least, I must have been, I remember the specific house, and I moved out of that house when I was 8. So I started doing like workout video type things when I was 8. So fitness and sports and athletics has been a part of my life, my whole life. But I used to just push myself to the limit, like so hard in so many ways. And for some people, 75 hard may seem like that and may be like, well, yeah, you're doing 2 45-minute workouts a day. That's like off the charts. And it can be, for people who are doing 2 45-minute HIIT workouts, or an extremely heavy lifting workout followed by an extremely intense cardio workout, it absolutely can be that. And for me, in this 75 hard, I've been trying to be really balanced, to allow my body the time and the space to recover, to allow my joints and my body systems to be able to recover. So for example, there have been a couple of times when I've done weights and intense runs in the same day, but the next day I'm absolutely taking it easy with a recovery walk, or with more sort of like strengthening, lengthening kinds of like yoga and Pilates kinds of movements, because I don't want to put as much strain on my joints. I don't want to burn myself out, and I certainly don't want to injure myself so that I won't be able to complete this journey at all. So I think being in my 40s, I've done a lot of work on myself, physically, to stay healthy, but also psychologically through therapy and through introspection and through learning and just growth and experience. So I think I'm in a lot better place now to take care of my body than I was back when I was just exercising to grind and exercising to try to be a certain size, or to look a certain way. And now the challenge for me is really more about following through with what I say I'm going to do and being true to myself, and less about the sort of like self-punishment that goes along with that really intense workout. The other component I'll say about my age is the hormonal changes that I've been experiencing. So like a lot of people in their late 30s through 40s, I have a lot of hormonal shifts that are happening. I have been working with medical professionals to manage that in a variety of ways, through nutrition, through exercise, through supplementation. And I'm not going to go into detail about that or advise about that, because I'm not qualified to do that. But if you are in your late 30s or 40s, um, identified identified female at birth, and still menstruating, I would encourage you to, check with a medical professional if you're curious. But for me, a lot of the ways that I'm approaching 75 hard are intentional to work well with my aging body. So, for example, the weight training is really intentional. Yeah, sometimes I do, like I said, the more lengthening, strengthening kinds of Pilates yoga sort of stuff, but that's not the majority of it. I do try to lift heavy as a way to preserve my bone density, as a way to preserve my muscle and to stay strong. I'm not about to become some frail old person. I need to be strong, and I need to keep my ability to balance and to bounce back and to be resilient. So, skeleton one, I'm in my 40s, and that definitely impacts how 75 hard is going for me and also how I'm approaching it. Second piece is my environment, I guess, for lack of a better word. I kind of forget that this is strange because it's just so normal to me, but I don't have a television, and I haven't had one in decades. I don't know. It's been a really long time. And I also don't use social media besides LinkedIn and, well, YouTube. So a lot of the things that influence people, like television or like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok or whatever, are things that are kind of outside of my realm of understanding. Obviously, by watching content on YouTube, I'm still exposed to a lot of the same stuff that other people are. But I feel like I'm a little bit outside of pop culture sometimes, or I'm a little bit even counterculture, just because I don't know what to keep up with or how to keep up with things in the same way that people who are extremely online might. I mean, I still exist in society, and I have friends and family members and colleagues and people in my orbit. So I certainly am exposed to things through them. But I guess the reason I share that is because I think a lot of the struggles that people face when it comes to time management or trusting themselves come from this sort of addictive pull that social media and that media in general can have. So, if the pattern is to come home and turn on TV and to sit and relax, which, I mean, we all deserve rest and relaxation, certainly, but if that's the pattern, it's harder to break that when that is your pattern than somebody like me who doesn't have a TV to come home and turn on. Or if your pattern is when you're having a stressful moment or when you're feeling bored to be on your phone looking through Instagram, it's harder to turn that habit off when you already have that habit or you already have that pattern than somebody like me who doesn't have that. Does that mean I never waste time? No, I waste time all the time, and we'll talk about that later. But luckily for me, I don't have those same habits, so I'm not pulled into those same I'm not pulled into that same vortex of sort of social media addiction. What I will say is that if that's something that you think could be a barrier to you during, if you're trying to do something like 75 hard, or if you're trying to achieve other goals in your life, it might be worth taking a break. For me, well, the TV didn't start as a break. That was a really I just don't want a TV. Well, it started as I don't want a TV in the living room. If there is a TV in the house, so be it. But I don't want it to be in the main room, because then when people are trying to have a conversation, it's like all eyes are on the screen, So, but it turned into, well, barely watching the TV, and anything that a person would want to watch could probably be streamed on a computer. And if it's on a small screen, it's not as addictive. You have to intentionally set it up and turn it on and put it someplace, and it's not the whole cinematic experience where you're just there zoning out. So anyway, I digress. But So, maybe you don't need to throw away your TV. I'm not saying that. And certainly if it's functional, don't throw it away. Somebody else might want that. But at least for the social media, for me, it started as taking a break. And I just was in a particularly stressful time, professionally, personally, and even like in the outer world environment. And I just was overwhelmed by social media. And so I just like took a break, and I just was like, okay, I'm, turning all of this off. And I don't even know if I set a time period. I mean, this is so long ago, I don't even remember, but it was like, I just need to take a break. And it was at first terrifying. Like I actually was terrified. Like, oh my God, I don't know what people are doing. I don't know who's hanging out with who. I don't know what I'm missing out on. And eventually all of those feelings faded. And I just didn't care. I just didn't care anymore because I didn't know what I was missing. And I have, of course, since found out about things that I've missed because people had a gathering and they used social media for the invitation and I didn't get it or whatever. And they didn't think to reach out by text or email. And that kind of stings a little bit. But also, I find that most people that I'm really close to that I would want to be included for something take the time to send me a text message or an email. So I'm probably not missing out on anything that's that critical. So yeah, if you're trying to do a new challenge, that's like a challenge in and of itself. So I'm not saying to stack challenge upon challenge upon challenge. That might be overkill. But if you think that you would be able to turn the volume on some of those things down, or be more intentional with the time you're using your social media or you're watching television, it can go a long way toward not only freeing up the time to commit to yourself to do nice things for yourself, but to just free up your headspace to not feel so exhausted and burdened and overwhelmed all the time. I think I've said more than I need to say on that point, so we'll leave that there. So speaking of addiction, that kind of leads into the next quirk or the next skeleton. So one of the things you might know about 75 Hard is that you're not supposed to consume any alcohol during the 75 days. And this is something I haven't talked about at all in my YouTubing comments. And it's something I didn't even include on my tracking sheet. And it didn't even occur to me because alcohol isn't a part of my life. Not because of some sort of like, I don't drink, like some moral superiority, but because I did used to drink, and I used to drink heavily, and I did a lot of damage to myself, I think, by drinking in the past. And now that I don't drink, it's so like foreign to me that it wasn't even something worth putting on the form. And so I hadn't even thought about talking about it, but it is this sort of central piece of 75 Hard. So I do want to address it. And I want to talk about it also within the context of addictive behaviors. So yes, I've been a drinker in the past, and I don't know if I would go as far as saying that I was an actual alcoholic. I certainly didn't have this sort of like chemical dependency that some addicts have, or that people with severe alcoholism have. So in that case, I can't quite speak from that perspective. But I can speak from a person who I would say was a problem drinker. And along with that, I have other addictive behaviors and tendencies. So for example, I have some issues with food, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and also with shopping and just impulsive behaviors in general, impulsive and compulsive. I tend to find myself really driven by routines and by habits. And so it's like once I've done something and I've liked it, like that pattern is like, yeah, we're going to keep doing that. So it's like sort of a benign example, but there's this grocery store in the city where I work that had the best hot chocolate in the universe. And I happened to go to this grocery store before work one time to get some grocery item I needed for work that day. And I got a hot chocolate to take to work with me. And then that became the habit. And it wasn't like if I didn't have it, I would have, gone into withdrawal or I would have had a terrible day, but it was just like such a like, oh, I just really like this. This is so nice. It feels great. And so I got into a pattern where I was going and getting hot chocolate like at least multiple times, probably 3-4 times a week, which A, isn't particularly healthy, and B, is also extremely expensive. So I give all of that context to say that I'm the kind of person that finds it really easy to fall into habitual behaviors. And if only those habitual behaviors were like eating broccoli and exercising 45 minutes twice a day, right? But for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, for good scientific, probably dopamine related reasons, these sort of patterns and behaviors are all related around things that give us that jolt of energy, that spark of dopamine, and those good feelings, whatever those other neurotransmitters, those other brain chemicals are. So 75 hard for me is not directly related to the shopping thing. Although I have some other work going on in the backside for me related to that. And I'm considering how I might bring that into this channel in the future to talk a little bit about my shopping behaviors and some of my addictive tendencies related to that. So if that's of interest, drop a comment, let me know. But going back to the alcohol piece, if you are somebody who does drink alcohol, and if you're somebody who feels like, giving up alcohol for 75 days wouldn't be hard for you, then it's not really a problem. It's not really worth, addressing, in my comments here, because you'll just do it and it won't be a problem. For somebody like me, back when I was drinking, the idea of giving up drinking for 75 days would have been extremely difficult, because I drank almost every day, and I certainly drank every weekend. And yeah, I mean, it was kind of the center of my social life and sort of a big part of my identity and my personality, even if that's not like the definition of a personality. So my advice is to be thoughtful about that and seek support if you think it would be helpful. I didn't, as I mentioned, I don't really identify with being an alcoholic. I didn't go through like an Alcoholics Anonymous or a 12-step program. I stopped drinking on my, as a choice on my own. It was inspired by my partner, who had also stopped drinking. And I finally had this wake-up call, like, I do all of these things to take care of myself. I eat really well, I exercise, I go to therapy, I, try to, live this really healthy life. And every day I'm poisoning myself over and over. So I kind of did a little bit of that work on my own. And I luckily was able, I think having a person in the household who's on that same journey is really helpful. I don't know if I would have come to that conclusion as quickly on my own. And I'm grateful that I had, a partner to go through that with. And that I have friends who are really supportive and who, aren't, asking probing questions, or who aren't making assumptions, or who aren't pressuring or whatever. But my suggestion is, if you're somebody who you think it might be difficult, maybe check in with a therapist about it, or maybe see if you have a roommate or a partner or a friend who'd be willing to explore that journey with you, even if temporarily, because getting started is the hardest part. And then the sustaining part, like I said, I don't even really think about it anymore. And I play volleyball at bars 3 nights a week. I'm constantly around alcohol. It's part of the culture where I live. And I don't even give it a second thought anymore. But there would have been a time when it would have been much harder. So enough about all of that. On to the next quirk, or skeleton. And this one is actually pretty closely related to the last one. So I am somebody who has had an eating disorder, or who has had eating disorders. At this point, I would say the most active times of those eating disorders are 25 to 30 years ago. So it's quite far in my past at this point that the peak of those issues were in play, but very similar to how alcoholics and addicts often describe, like, once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic or whatever. I sort of feel like that a little bit with eating disorders. And the reason I say it like that is while I don't necessarily think about eating disorder, I don't think about my eating disorder past, or I don't necessarily have issues with eating disorders every single day. It's always a part of who I am, and it's always something that's there below the surface. So while I can be in a very healthy phase when it comes to my diet and my exercise, a stressful moment, a really tough trauma, a weak moment that just has the right pile on of factors can be a triggering point, can be something that can send me into either an overeating or an undereating pattern. And luckily, at this point, I'm able to recognize those things pretty quickly, and I'm able to kind of steer myself back on the right pathway. But again, it hasn't always been easy. And so, if we were back all those years ago, when this was active for me, something like 75 hard would have not been appropriate. I would have been extremely drawn to it. I would have been in love with it. I would have been like the best 75 hard person in the universe. I would have done it on overdrive. And it would have been extremely unhealthy for me to have done it at that point in my life. So if you're somebody who has an active eating disorder, 75 hard is maybe not for you. And if you're somebody who has a history of eating disorders, you have to do a lot of soul searching to determine whether it's right for you. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a psychiatrist. And I certainly don't specialize in eating disorders aside from having my own personal experience with them. So I would say that, for me, when I approach 75 hard, it can have these very restrictive elements to it, depending on how you set up the diet portion of it. And for me, I knew that having an extremely strict diet would not be the perfect plan for me because of the way I'm wired and because of my past. So for me, it was easier to say my nutrition strategy, my diet strategy for this is to avoid late night snacking and, junk snacking between meals. So I can pretty much eat what I want during meals, and I can have planned healthy snacks, but I can't just suddenly be like, oh, I'm bored, I'm going to go eat junk. Or it's, 10 p.m. and I'm watching a movie and I want to have a snack or something like that. So for me, it's not about numbers. It's not about anything really specific that I can become obsessed with. It's really about saying, be intentional with what you're eating. Make sure you're eating enough to fuel yourself. Eat well. I have been measuring my macros and micros and things like that, but not from a place of perfection, but from a place of making sure I have adequate energy and nutrition supply to fuel this process. So I will leave that at that. Next one, next quirk or skeleton is that I'm plant-based. I think I might have mentioned that or alluded to it at some point in some video. I've been plant-based for about 14 years. And so for those, some other terms people might use would be vegan, which is a bit more of a philosophical stance. And yeah, so basically I eat plants and I don't eat meat or dairy or animal products. And I put asterisks because I'm not a perfect vegan. I'll eat honey, for example. And I have, wool and leather items and things like that. So sometimes strict vegans would see me as not part of that. But in terms of what I eat plant-based. I eat grains, I eat fruits, vegetables, mushrooms, legumes, seeds, nuts, and so on. So that's not something that I feel ashamed of or anything, but I do think it's important context to just understand where I'm coming from, how I'm approaching this. And also, it is a challenge, admittedly, to be really intentional about eating plant-based when I'm exercising as much as I am with 75 hard. So, on days when I'm lifting and running, I need to eat a lot, and I really need to prioritize my protein to make sure that I am not losing muscle while I'm going through this process. Like, of course, I don't think most people care about losing fat. If I lose a little bit of fat, great. But I don't want to lose muscle. I'm at a point in my life where gaining and sustaining muscle is difficult. So I need to preserve what I've got with everything I have. So plant-based, you absolutely can get plenty of protein. I've been averaging around 100 grams of protein per day. My actual goal is a little bit closer to like 120, 130. But if I'm hitting 100, I feel good about it. And yeah. But I think everybody needs to, again, consult their own nutritionist, do their own research about what's right for them. But for me, that's what I'm aiming for. And I haven't been having issues with it. But I do have to be thoughtful. And sometimes I might have kind of a weird meal where I make something and then I'm like, and now I'm going to throw in a chunk of tofu. I'm going to throw in a vegan burger or something just to add a little extra. But, I'm not complaining. It's fun to eat a little bit more. All right. And I guess the last quirk of my 75 hard journey, or the last nuance or skeleton, and I have mentioned this before, I know for sure, is that I am neurodivergent. And so I think that's sort of like the backdrop of like all of these other things, because that intersects with all of the things that I do. I'm autistic and have ADHD. Those two things are related and yet different. How that shows up for me in 75 hard is, in some ways I can be hyper focused. Like I might be like, when I was working on building my spreadsheet, for example, I was in it. I was like hyper focused. Or sometimes when I'm like behind the scenes, like working on the YouTube, trying to upload stuff, I'm like in it and extremely focused, and time fades away. And yet I'm also still procrastinating, and I'm still finding myself distracted. And I'm still finding it, sometimes like I'm all over the place, or like I'm struggling to find a through line of how I'm approaching 75 hard, or this channel, or, life in general. And I guess on the more autistic side, when I reflect on how that is showing up for me, as I mentioned before, like habits and patterns are extremely soothing for me. So once I find something that I like and that works for me, it's like I want to just do that on repeat. And on one hand, I could presume, like there's nothing to prevent me in 75 hard to be like, I do a walk every morning and I do weights every night. That would be like probably the nice and easy thing to do. But I've had to throw in, and I'm training for a half marathon, and I play volleyball, and I've had to throw in all these other layers, which then gives me this sort of like tumultuous feeling of like overwhelm, and how am I going to keep it all together? And just when I think I find a pattern that works for me, I have to throw some wrench in it because my schedule changes, or whatever. The great news is that I have a lot of practice in my life in coping with these things at this point. So I think I'm relatively resilient. And I guess what I'm trying to allow myself to do is the parts that can become routine and that can help me feel that sort of soothing aspect of it. I'm really trying to like allow those to amplify. And then when chaos ensues, I'm trying to enjoy it for the novelty that it brings, and for the dopamine that it brings, and just not stress out too much about it. And I think that for me is a testament to the amount of work I've done on myself too, because a past version of me was such a perfectionist that, none of this would have flown. I would have been like, I would have given up after the first day that wasn't perfect. And when I say not perfect, I don't mean like missing one of the required elements, because that's part of the process. But like the first day that I didn't work out at the exact time that I wanted to, or the first day that, my macros weren't exactly what I wanted them to be. Like a past version of me would have been obsessive enough that I would have derailed at that point. So I am really proud of myself for the work that I've done to be able to sustain something like this and to be able to talk about it publicly too. I mean, this is extremely out of my comfort zone. Even though I talk publicly for a living, I don't put myself on camera and put myself on the internet. That is bizarre. But I wanted a way to be accountable to myself, and I wanted a way to maybe, share this with other people or help other people on their journey. And so here I am, and day 15. So I guess to wrap things up, I'll give you a quick preview of my day. I have a 7-mile run today, actually, so that is going to kick my butt. And I had intended to get out the door earlier, but then I ate, and I'm like, well, I'll digest and I'll film while I digest. And then later in the day, I plan to do some pretty low-key, easy, relaxing, either yoga or stretching or walk to allow my body to recover from the intensity of that run. So water is on target, nutrition is on target, no alcohol, because I haven't been mentioning that, but I'm not drinking. The book is still going awesome. I should do a book update at some point. I'm loving this book so much, and yeah, I'm feeling good, and I'm proud of myself. And I hope that even if you decide for whatever reason that 75 hard isn't right for you, I hope that you are able to find a project or a program or something that can ignite or spark something in you to get you started on achieving a goal, even if it's to write more or be more creative or, speak more publicly or, eat more fruits, whatever it might be. I hope that you can find something to inspire you and help you to stay accountable to yourself for whatever your project might be. Thanks for following along with my journey, and I'll see you tomorrow.